He used to be just a shadow, silent and unnoticed in the noisy streets. A ghost no one ever looked back at. No home, no name, no past. Every night, he curled up under a bridge, waiting for daylight like it was a miracle that would never come. But then, one fateful afternoon, he threw himself into danger to save a life. And in that fleeting, almost forgotten moment, his whole fate was shaken to the core. He once had it all: a small, warm home, a steady job, and simple dreams. But life doesn't send warnings before the storm hits. A sudden accident took his wife and little daughter from him. The pain struck like a wound that would never heal. He spiraled, drowning in guilt, in alcohol, in sleepless nights. Friends drifted away, the job disappeared, and eventually, so did the roof over his head. He became homeless, not out of laziness or failure, but because no one caught him when he fell. In the middle of the crowded city, he turned invisible. No one asked his name, no one looked him in the eye. Each day became a loop, begging, dodging, surviving. People called him the crazy guy under the bridge or that nutjob mumbling on the sidewalk. He didn't fight back. He'd stopped hoping. His heart, once full of love, had turned into silence and ashes. On long, freezing nights, he'd look up at the sky and ask himself, "Why am I still alive?" The question never had an answer. Sometimes, he'd dream of the past, his daughter's laughter, a warm family meal, only to wake up in filth and car horns, his heart bleeding all over again. He lived without purpose, without direction. Just a breathing corpse. Each passing day was another layer of dust burying the memories that once gave him life. To the world, he was garbage on the sidewalk. To himself, he was a living proof of a life that had already died. But life, sometimes, all it takes is a single moment to change course. And that moment is coming. Soft as a breath. And no one, not even him, can see it coming. It was a sweltering summer afternoon. He sat hunched on the sidewalk, eyes vacant, watching the endless stream of strangers pass him by. No one paid him any attention, just like every other day. Then, a scream tore through the noisy street. "Help! Someone fell into the canal." He turned his head on instinct. A child was flailing in the murky water, tiny and terrified as the current tossed her around. Adults crowded the edge, some pulled out their phones to film, others shouted for help, but not a single person jumped in. Time froze. No one moved. The child was slipping under. He didn't think. Didn't have time to think. With a single push off the ground, he dove into the water like he was chasing the soul he'd lost long ago. Cold. Heavy. His frail body thrashed against the raging current, but he kept swimming. In his mind, he heard the cries of the daughter he couldn't save. He reached the child, grabbed hold, and forced her above the surface. Nearly spent, he summoned the last of his strength to push her toward the bank. Another pair of hands pulled her out. He sank again, his chest burning. Everything began to fade. When they pulled him from the water, the girl was safe. Voices buzzed around him. He's homeless. Why would he do that? Wasn't he afraid of dying? People snapped pictures. Recorded videos. Someone even asked his name. For the first time in years, someone wanted to know who he was. But he just sat there, gasping, shivering from the cold and exhaustion. He didn't need praise. He didn't even know why he'd done it. All he knew was, when he saw that child sinking, he couldn't just stand there. Maybe, somewhere deep inside, his heart wasn't completely dead. Maybe he was still human. News spread faster than he ever imagined. By the next morning, the video of a homeless man risking his life to save a child had flooded social media. People called him a silent hero, a guardian angel without a home. The press picked up the story. TV stations aired the footage. But him? He was still sitting in the same spot, his clothes still damp, eyes still weary. The next day, the child's mother found him. She threw her arms around him right there on the street, sobbing uncontrollably. The little girl, safe now, shyly stepped forward and placed a small candy into his hand. "Thank you, mister," she said. Her voice was soft. Warm. he didn't know how to react. For the first time in years, someone hugged him, not out of pity, but out of gratitude. For the first time, a child looked at him without fear or disgust. His heart, long thought to be stone, cracked open painfully, and then came alive again. A local charity reached out, offering him temporary housing. A nearby auto repair shop offered him a job. The very people he thought would always walk past him were now turning back, holding out their hands. He was overwhelmed, skeptical, unsure if any of it was real. He'd grown used to being invisible, so the sudden light felt blinding. But slowly, little by little, he allowed himself to be helped, to be seen, not as the homeless guy, but as a person, with a name, a story, and worth. What seemed like a reckless act turned into a turning point. Not just for him, but for everyone who witnessed it. A man who seemed to have nothing left to give gave the one thing that mattered most: courage. And with it, he awakened a life that was never truly lost. Even with the help he'd received, a clean bed in his first job in years, it wasn't easy to adjust. Those first few nights, lying on a real mattress in a quiet room, he'd jolt awake in a panic. No roar of traffic. No stench of garbage. No cold concrete bridge above him. He was afraid it was all a dream. That he'd wake up back on the street, curled beneath the night sky. The owner of the repair shop, a former soldier, never asked about his past. He just taught him, patiently, one small task at a time. And slowly, the man began to remember what trust felt like. What it meant to be relied on. To be expected. Sometimes, his hands trembled. Years had passed since he last held a tool. Sometimes, he cried when someone handed him a lunchbox and asked, "You doing okay today, brother?" One evening after work, he wandered back to the old neighborhood, the place that used to be home. The house now belonged to someone else. Fresh paint had erased every trace of what once was. But he stood outside the gate for a long time. Memories came rushing in. His daughter's voice calling, "Daddy." His wife's thin figure cooking in the kitchen. The scent of sun-dried school uniforms on the clothesline. It was all gone now. But the ache remained. He didn't knock. He didn't try to reclaim what couldn't return. He just stood there in silence. Then turned away. Not to run this time, but to move forward. With a heart that no longer resisted life. When he returned, he approached the shop owner and asked if he could learn more. He started taking notes, cleaning more carefully, even laughing and chatting with co-workers. Every small step felt like a victory. He was no longer a lost soul drifting through the world. He was becoming part of it again, quietly, but unmistakably. The past couldn't be erased. But he had learned to walk with it, instead of letting it drag him down. His new life didn't arrive like a miracle. It came step by quiet step. Each scar accepted. Each breath no longer panicked by the need to survive. After 3 months of hard work at the repair shop, he was officially hired. For the first time in years, he had an employee badge. A bank account. A name called out during the Monday morning meeting. He rented a small room, just enough for a single bed and an old wooden desk. Each morning, he brewed coffee and opened the window to let in the sunlight. On rainy days, he sat quietly and listened to each drop fall. Not with loneliness, but with a quiet sense of being alive. He began volunteering at charity food runs with his new group of friends. The first time he handed out a meal, his hands trembled as a homeless man approached. Empty eyes, hunched shoulders. So much like who he once was. He offered the meal, gently held the man's hand, and said just one thing: "I used to be you. If you're still breathing, you still have a chance." His story continued to spread. No longer a viral headline, but a quiet source of inspiration. A few schools invited him to speak. Standing on stage, voice still unsure, he spoke of the darkness he'd once fallen into. And the moment saving a child ended up saving himself. Each time he told his story, he no longer choked up from pain, but from gratitude. Grateful to still be alive. Grateful he didn't let go when everything seemed lost. Today, he doesn't call himself a hero. He doesn't think he's special. He's just a man like any other, lucky enough to be given a second chance. And he's spending the rest of his life offering that chance to anyone who needs it. Because sometimes, all it takes is one hand reaching out to pull a soul out of the dark. In a city full of noise and rush, there lives a man once forgotten, now leading a quiet, simple, but whole life. He no longer sleeps beneath bridges, no longer avoids the eyes of others. Now, he looks straight ahead, at strangers, at his own reflection, with the calm of someone who has walked through hell and found his way back. He's learned that kindness doesn't need to be grand. Even the smallest act, if it's genuine, can touch someone else's heart. And maybe your own. Life can always begin again, as long as you're brave enough to live just one more day. To you, the one reading this now, if you feel lost, exhausted, or hopeless, please remember, you still matter. You are still worthy of love. And if you can, don't hesitate to reach out a hand to someone who's falling. Because maybe, just maybe, you won't only save them, you'll save yourself too.